What happens when a mother's plea for help is met with silence? She made a decision no one expected, and what followed left her entire family stunned. Margaret Harper stood on the front porch, surveying the only house she'd ever called home. The late afternoon sun glinted off the peeling paint of the railing, highlighting cracks in the steps that had deepened with every harsh winter. The garden, once her pride and joy, was now overtaken by weeds, and the fence along the back sagged where last year's storm had split a post. She gripped the envelope in her hand, a new estimate from the handyman, outlining all the urgent repairs the house needed. Plumbing, the roof, the water heater, long past its last breath. Margaret sighed, her breath shaky. She'd tried to keep up with everything since Henry died, but the truth was, she was growing tired. The house felt bigger and more demanding with each year. Inside, she brewed tea and waited for her son. David was due any minute. She'd asked him to stop by after work, promising cookies and a warm meal. In truth, she hoped for more: help, reassurance, maybe even the sense that she wasn't facing all this alone. The clock ticked. The sun dipped lower. Finally, David's old sedan pulled up. He stepped onto the porch, glancing at his phone, already distracted. "Hey, Mom," he called, barely looking at her as he wiped his shoes and came in. The scent of oatmeal cookies hung in the air, but David didn't notice. He shrugged off his coat and sat at the table, glancing at the estimate Margaret slid toward him. "What's all this?" he asked, brow furrowed. Margaret tried to explain: the leaky faucet, the sagging fence, the loose gutter that clattered during every rainstorm. "It's just too much for me to handle on my own," she said, voice soft but steady. "I was hoping you could help. Maybe this weekend? We could start with the faucet." David frowned, pushing the paper away. "Mom, I'm swamped. You know how busy I am at work. Besides, none of this is urgent. The house has lasted this long, hasn't it?" He reached for a cookie, eyes never meeting hers. Margaret's heart tightened. She tried again. "I know you're busy, but even just a few hours." David cut her off. "Why not just hire someone? Or let things be? It's not like anyone's coming to inspect the place." He scrolled his phone, checking messages. "Besides, when you're ready, you'll just leave it to me anyway." The words stung more than Margaret expected. After dinner, David left quickly, mumbling something about deadlines. He promised to check in soon, but Margaret heard the hollowness in his voice. She wandered through the quiet house, trailing her fingers along chipped door frames, memories echoing in every corner. Children's laughter, birthday cakes, Henry fixing the porch swing, David learning to ride his first bike down the very path now choked with dandelions. The house was tired, but so was Margaret. That night, a heavy rain began to fall, the leaky gutter drumming just outside her bedroom. Margaret barely slept. She got up, made a list of repairs, and stared at it with a strange mix of sadness and resolve. No matter how she tried to keep the old place together, it seemed she was the only one who cared. At breakfast, she called the handyman again for a new quote. She also found herself searching online, almost without thinking, for homes for sale in my area. The idea lingered, uneasy but persistent. Still, she kept her routine, watering the plants, reading the paper, waving at neighbors who strolled past. The world outside spun on, indifferent to her struggle. Days passed. Margaret saw David's updates on social media, weekend trips, work dinners, everything but a visit to his mother's house. Friends from church offered help, but Margaret always smiled, insisting she was fine. She didn't want to be a burden, even as the list of repairs grew. One afternoon, the plumber came to look at the water heater. He shook his head, apologetic. "Ma'am, you're looking at a full replacement. Won't be cheap." Margaret nodded, thanked him, and watched as he drove away, leaving her alone again with her worries and the worn-out house. She walked into the living room, looked out at the sagging fence, and for the first time allowed herself to wonder, what if there was another way? What if she wasn't the one who had to keep everything together? Margaret picked up the estimate, folded it neatly, and placed it in her desk drawer. She was tired of asking for help that never came. Margaret's resolve grew stronger with each passing day. She continued to hope, still giving David every chance to show up for her, but the house kept pressing its demands. The roof leaked again during the next storm, leaving a spreading stain in the upstairs hallway. The garden, untended, grew wilder, and the kitchen faucet now dripped steadily, filling a bowl Margaret kept beneath the sink. Sunday, after church, Margaret invited David for lunch. He texted back, "Can't today, Mom. Maybe next week." She tried not to take it personally, telling herself he was busy, that his life was full and complicated. Still, the ache in her chest grew. Her friend Marian, sensing something was wrong, stopped by with a basket of fresh tomatoes. "You look tired," Marian said, setting the basket on the table. Margaret smiled, brushing off her concerns, but Marian saw through her. "You know, you don't have to do all of this alone. There are people who would help." Margaret shook her head. "I can't keep asking. David acts like it's a burden every time I call." Marian patted her hand. "Then maybe it's time to do something for yourself. Maybe it's time to let go." That evening, Margaret tried one more time. She called David, her voice careful, determined not to sound desperate. "The roof is leaking again, and the water heater is on its last legs. Could you come by this weekend? I can't manage it all alone." David sounded distracted. "Mom, I've got back-to-back meetings, and I promised Karen we'd take the kids to the lake. Can't the handyman do it? Or maybe just let it wait? You're always fussing over that house." Margaret felt the words cut, deep and sharp. "It's not just a house, David. It's our home. It's memories." He sighed. "I know, Mom. But life changes. It's just not my priority right now. We'll talk soon, okay?" He hung up before she could say more. Margaret stood in the kitchen, staring at the phone. The drip of the faucet sounded louder than ever. She wiped her eyes, then reached for her notebook, making a fresh list: roof, water heater, fence. She circled the words, her pen pressing hard into the paper. The next morning, Margaret called 3 local realtors. She asked them to come by for evaluations, just to see what the house might be worth. The first, a brisk woman named Sandra, toured the house and shook her head at the repairs. "It's a lovely home, but buyers want turnkey these days. Still, the market's strong. You'd get interest, even with the work." Margaret nodded, asking questions, her mind whirring. For the first time, the idea didn't feel like defeat. It felt like possibility. Sandra promised to send over numbers by the end of the week. Margaret walked the house room by room, looking at each chipped baseboard and faded picture on the wall. She remembered birthday parties, Christmas mornings, David and his sister building forts in the backyard. She realized the memories would go with her, not stay trapped in the walls. When Marian stopped by again, Margaret surprised her. "I might be ready to let it go. I think I'm done waiting for help that isn't coming." Marian squeezed her arm. "You deserve peace, Margaret. You deserve a life that's yours." That night, Margaret slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The burden of hoping and asking had lifted, replaced by a quiet determination. She woke early, made tea, and watched the sunrise from the front porch, the neighborhood still and silent. As the birds began to sing, Margaret felt something unfamiliar, a flicker of excitement at the thought of a new beginning, one shaped by her own decisions, not by anyone else's absence. The realtor, Sandra, moved quickly. By midweek, Margaret's house was listed online with photos that managed to capture both the charm and the wear. Margaret watched strangers walk through her home, their footsteps echoing in the halls where her children's laughter once rang. She straightened pillows and baked cookies for the open house, the scent wafting through rooms that now felt both hers and not hers at all. Margaret felt a strange duality, grief for the years spent filling this house with love, and a cautious hope for the future. Each day, she balanced the chores of upkeep with phone calls from Sandra updating her on interest from buyers. Some came, shook their heads at the needed repairs, and left quickly. Others lingered, asking questions, seeing through the peeling paint to the strong bones underneath. During one showing, a young couple with a toddler walked the backyard, their child chasing butterflies in the tall grass. Margaret stood at the kitchen window, heart aching with nostalgia and a bittersweet pride. She remembered David at that age, playing on the same patch of grass, Henry's laughter ringing out as he pushed the swing. She wondered if the house would suit this new family, if their memories would settle gently atop her own. David remained absent. He texted occasionally, always brief, "Hope the house stuff is going well. Let me know if you need anything." Margaret never replied to these, sensing the emptiness behind his words. She knew now that she was truly on her own in this decision. Marion kept her company, bringing magazines with articles about downsizing and senior communities. "There's so much out there," she said. "You could find a place near the park. Or even by the water. You don't have to settle." Margaret read the brochures, weighing options in quiet moments between showings. She began to imagine a life without the burdens of repairs, a smaller place, no steps to climb, maybe neighbors her own age. She could join a book club, volunteer, travel to see her sister in Oregon. The future, once frightening, grew almost inviting. Sandra called on a Thursday evening. "We have an offer. It's from a couple relocating from out of state. They love the house, even with the work it needs. It's a fair price, Margaret. Higher than I expected, honestly." Margaret's heart thudded. "Strangers?" she asked, her voice trembling. Sandra's tone was kind. "They seem like good people. They wrote a letter. They want to start a family here. They say it feels like home already." Margaret sat at her kitchen table, letter in hand, tears welling as she read about their dreams for the house. She pictured new life filling these rooms, laughter and love blooming again. It felt right, somehow, that the house would go on. That night, she called Marion. "I think I'm ready to say yes," she said, her voice both certain and shaky. "Then do it, Margaret," Marion replied. "You've carried this house long enough. Let it carry someone else now." The next morning, Margaret signed the papers, hand steady. Sandra hugged her, and Margaret felt the weight of decades begin to lift. The house, at last, would have a new chapter, and so would she. With the sale pending, Margaret's days filled with tasks she never expected to face alone. She sorted through closets packed with decades of life, children's drawings, Henry's old fishing gear, faded photo albums, and keepsakes that tugged at her heart. Every item brought a decision: pack it, gift it, let it go. One rainy afternoon, Margaret finally called David. She'd avoided the conversation, dreading his reaction. When he answered, she heard the usual distraction in his voice. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" She spoke gently but firmly. "David, I want you to know I've sold the house. I got a good offer from a nice couple. I couldn't keep up with the repairs anymore, and I realized I was doing this alone." A long pause. "You sold the house? Without talking to me first?" Margaret steadied herself. "I tried to include you, David. I asked for your help, but you made it clear you couldn't. I had to do what was right for me." He sounded shocked, almost angry. "But that's our family home. I thought you were just getting estimates, Mom. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it." Margaret felt a sting of guilt but also a new firmness. "I waited, David. I hoped you'd care, that you'd want to be involved. But this house has become too much for me. I have to put myself first for once." David grew quiet, then defensive. "Well, I'm just surprised. I would have helped if I'd known it was really that bad. I thought there was time." Margaret's voice softened. "We always think there's more time, until there isn't. I hope you can understand why I did this." The call ended awkwardly. Margaret sat at the kitchen table, heart pounding, but she knew she'd made the right choice. She called Marion, who insisted on coming over with takeout and a bottle of wine. They sat together, watching the rain, sharing stories, and toasting to new beginnings. Over the next week, Margaret packed boxes, each one lighter than the last. She gave David and his family a chance to take anything they wanted. He sent his wife, Karen, who picked out a few things for the grandchildren but didn't linger. One afternoon, Emma and Toby stopped by, running through the old rooms, chasing Diesel as Margaret watched with bittersweet pride. She explained to them, as simply as she could, that Grandma would soon have a new house. Smaller, easier, but still full of love. Neighbors came by to say goodbye, some with tears, others with small gifts. Mrs. Carter from across the street brought a basket of her famous blueberry muffins. "You've been the heart of this block, Margaret. We'll miss you." Margaret smiled, touched beyond words. For the first time, she allowed herself to look ahead, to freedom from leaking roofs and sagging fences, to days filled with possibility and peace. On the last evening in her home, Margaret walked from room to room, touching each wall, whispering thanks for the years of shelter and warmth. She slept soundly, the decision finally at rest inside her. Moving day dawned crisp and clear. Margaret rose before sunrise, heart fluttering with nervous energy. The movers arrived promptly, strong-armed and cheerful, their practiced efficiency a sharp contrast to the heaviness Margaret felt inside. Box after box disappeared from each room, her memories, bundled into cardboard and sealed with tape. Marian arrived early, sleeves rolled, ready to help with last-minute sorting. They worked in companionable silence, laughter mixing with tears as they unearthed treasures and oddities. Margaret's wedding veil, a box of old Christmas ornaments, letters Henry wrote her when they were young. Marian insisted she keep the letters, tucking them safely in a bag for Margaret's new bedside table. David didn't show up. He texted in the morning, "Hope it all goes smoothly. Sorry I can't be there. Work emergency." Margaret read the message and set the phone aside, feeling the familiar ache but choosing not to let it sour the day. She focused on the helpers who were there, the friends who hugged her, and the neighbors who stopped by for one last goodbye. As the house emptied, Margaret wandered from room to room one final time. She pressed her palm to the doorframe where David's height had been marked in pencil, now nearly faded away. In the kitchen, she took down the old clock, a gift from Henry, and tucked it into her purse. Each space echoed a little more, the house feeling both vast and small without her things. When the moving van pulled away, Margaret stood on the sidewalk, keys in hand, watching the new owners arrive. The young couple beamed, their toddler clutching a stuffed bear. "Thank you for taking such good care of this place," the wife said shyly. Margaret smiled, her heart swelling with bittersweet hope. "It's a house built on love. I hope it brings your family as much joy as it brought mine." Marian drove Margaret to her new apartment, a cozy, sunlit space overlooking a small park. The building manager greeted her with a welcome basket and showed her around. The kitchen was modern, the bathroom gleamed, and the balcony was perfect for potted herbs and morning coffee. Margaret unpacked slowly, arranging her favorite things first: photos, Henry's clock, the letters. The silence was different here, less lonely, more peaceful. That evening, Marian stayed for dinner, helping unpack dishes and chatting about new routines. They made plans to explore the neighborhood, check out the local community center, and join the Tuesday morning walking group. As the sun set, Margaret stepped onto her balcony, breathing in the fresh air. She felt lighter. There were no leaky gutters to fret over, no broken steps to repair, no constant sense of being behind. For the first time in years, her life was her own. Before bed, Margaret called David, leaving a gentle voicemail. "I'm settled in, David. The new place is nice. I hope you and your family can visit sometime. I love you." She wrote in her journal. A home is more than walls and roof, it's the people, the care, the memories. And it turns out, it's never too late to find home again. The first week in her new apartment was a whirl of small discoveries. Margaret found herself waking with the sun, unhurried by chores that once defined her mornings. She brewed coffee, sipped it on her balcony, and watched birds flit through the budding trees in the park below. The hush of early spring replaced the old house's creaks and rattles. The building's residents soon noticed their new neighbor. On Tuesday, Mrs. Edelman from 2B knocked with a plate of lemon bars and an invitation to bridge night. Margaret accepted, pleased to find the women lively, sharp, and full of neighborhood stories. She learned the best place to buy bread, where to get her hair done, and that Thursday mornings meant a lively farmer's market only a block away. Margaret joined the community's walking group with Marian. The group strolled through the park, swapping stories about children and grandchildren, arthritis remedies, and favorite books. Margaret found herself laughing more, her steps lighter with each walk. For the first time in years, she felt herself not as someone left behind, but as someone moving forward. She began volunteering at the library, helping children pick out books and reading stories during Saturday morning circle time. The staff welcomed her enthusiasm, and the parents often lingered to chat, grateful for her warmth and gentle advice. Margaret found a deep joy in these connections, a purpose that didn't rely on anyone else's approval or presence. One Saturday afternoon, Karen called to arrange a visit. She brought Emma and Toby, who ran to Margaret's arms, excited to see Grandma's new castle. They explored every corner, drew pictures for her fridge, and played in the park while Margaret watched with pride. Karen apologized for David's absence. He was still buried in work, but promised they'd all return soon. Margaret chose to believe her, content to enjoy what was offered without bitterness. David eventually called, his tone uncertain but sincere. "I'm glad you're happy, Mom. I guess I didn't realize how much you were carrying. Maybe I could come visit next weekend." Margaret agreed, making plans for a simple lunch. She felt no anger, only a calm acceptance. She had done what she needed, and the rest would unfold as it must. Marian remained her closest companion, the two sharing walks, meals, and laughter. "You're blooming, Margaret," Marian observed one afternoon. "I haven't seen you this alive in years." Margaret smiled. "I think I forgot how to put myself first. It's never too late to start." That evening, as dusk colored the sky, Margaret wrote in her journal. A new home, a new rhythm, and a life built on choice, not obligation. "I am not alone. I am free." David arrived the next Saturday, carrying a bouquet of tulips and wearing a tentative smile. Margaret welcomed him in, her heart beating with a mix of relief and old wounds. He looked around the apartment, taking in the bright windows, tidy kitchen, and touches of his childhood scattered throughout. Photos, a favorite mug, the old clock from home. "It's nice here, Mom," he said, genuine surprise in his voice. "Really cozy. You look happy." Margaret poured coffee and served the lemon bars Mrs. Edelman had sent over. Conversation started stiffly, work, the kids, the weather, but soon found its rhythm. Margaret told him about bridge night and the walking group, her volunteer work and new friends. She spoke with warmth, describing her mornings on the balcony and her pride in helping at the library. David grew quiet. "I guess I didn't realize how much you'd lost yourself, stuck in that old house. I should have done more. I'm sorry I let you carry it all." Margaret squeezed his hand. "We can't go back, David. I made the choices I had to. I'm not angry. I just hope you understand now." He nodded, guilt softening into acceptance. "I do. I really do." Emma and Toby burst through the door, running to hug Grandma. Margaret led them to the park, where she pushed Emma on the swing and played tag with Toby, her laughter ringing out. David watched, the realization dawning that his mother was not just surviving, she was thriving. Back at the apartment, David helped Margaret hang a shelf, chatting more easily now. He admired how she'd arranged the space, the balance of old memories and new beginnings. "You've built something beautiful here, Mom." They shared lunch and made plans for more visits. No obligations, just honest company. When David and the kids left, Margaret hugged him tightly. "Don't be a stranger, David. You're always welcome." That evening, the apartment felt fuller, not just with voices and laughter, but with the promise of genuine connection restored. Margaret phoned Marian to tell her about the visit, and they celebrated with a walk in the golden dusk. As she settled down for the night, Margaret wrote, "Forgiveness isn't a gift you give for the past, it's a promise for the future. My heart is open, my days are full, and my story isn't over yet." As summer deepened, Margaret's days blossomed with purpose. She became a fixture in the apartment community, leading the walking group on longer adventures, hosting book exchanges, even organizing an impromptu potluck in the courtyard. The neighbors, once polite strangers, became friends. There was laughter at the mailboxes, coffee shared on balconies, and evening strolls where stories, old and new, were swapped beneath the gentle glow of porch lights. Margaret's connection with her family took on new depth. Karen and the children visited often, their laughter filling the apartment as they played cards, baked cookies, and brought wildflowers from the park. Margaret made a ritual of writing Emma and Toby little notes, tucking them into books or pockets to find later, a grandmother's secret tradition. David, true to his word, visited every other week. Sometimes he came alone, helping Margaret hang a picture or carry groceries. Sometimes he brought the whole family, and they spent the day exploring the park or making dinner together. He apologized less, listened more, and slowly learned to accept Margaret's independence as a sign of her strength, not a rebuke to his shortcomings. On the anniversary of Henry's passing, Margaret invited Marian and a few neighbors for a simple dinner. They shared memories, toasted to old loves and new friendships, and filled the evening with warmth that banished the shadows of grief. Margaret took pride in her volunteer work at the library, where she was now known as Grandma Maggie to dozens of children. She started a story hour on Thursdays, drawing families from all over the neighborhood. One parent, watching her read with animation and kindness, said quietly, You've built a home here, for all of us." Late one afternoon, Margaret received a letter from the young couple who'd bought her house. There were photos, fresh paint on the porch, their little girl picking flowers in the yard, a new puppy dozing under the same tree where Emma and Toby once played. "Thank you for passing on your home," the letter read. "We feel your care in every corner." Margaret wept, not from sadness, but from the joy of knowing her years of love had not been wasted. They had simply grown new roots. As dusk settled, Margaret sat on her balcony with a cup of tea, Marion by her side. The sky faded pink, cicadas sang, and the city lights twinkled below. Margaret opened her journal for the final entry of this chapter. "Letting go of what no longer serves us can be the bravest thing we do. I gave up a house, but found a life, full, rich, and truly my own. I am not who I was, and I am more than I ever expected to be." The world outside felt open, and Margaret, free at last from burdens, surrounded by the warmth of chosen family and new friends, smiled at the promise of all that was still to come.